What the dimensions as well as the ergonomics of the room would look like. So I apologize if it ends up being a little bit difficult to read, either up here on the screen or also in your handouts. And if for whatever reason you would like a copy of this most boring presentation that I'll be giving over the next 45 minutes, well, you're out of luck, because I'm not going to hand it to you. So anyway, I'm at Portland State, and I often wonder what to talk about when I'm asked to talk about this particular issue, organizational and administrative issues. It's almost like talking about perhaps having a conference on the circulatory system, and there's an hour allotted to talking about the heart. So when I think about organizational and administrative issues, I think about a lot of things that I think are all equally important, and no less or no more important than anything else on the roster of the docket of activities and conversations and topics for a conference as wonderful as this one. And I often also sometimes think about how interesting it is that we tend to silo ourselves off from other sources of knowledge that are equally relevant and equally interconnected as that which I may be sharing to some extent with you. So in the interest of perhaps priming the pump, and also to combat the effects of fatigue from a wonderful day of sessions already, and to prepare us for our final session of the afternoon before we go off and I think listen to music and have some opportunities to kind of engage in conversation and dialogue around these very diverse issues, and to prepare us also for tomorrow's conversations and workshops. I think what I would like to do is beg your patience as we engage in perhaps a priming the pump exercise that reflects the second slide in your handouts and also reflects this slide right here. So this is actually a real slide. Oh, thank you, because I was too awake and now I'm able to lull myself to sleep. I'm joking. So
what's so difficult?
I am difficult. I'm difficult because I have expectations even though I don't have goals. So anyway, so take a look at this quote. This quote is wonderful. This is from a real human being, as opposed to me, who is can and an academic. So this came from someone whom I value wonderfully, and she said, or he said, "My leadership team and I have noticed that there is a subset of line staff who come to work wondering if there's a better way to serve kids and families, and who are using academic research and whatever data we have available at our agency to try to figure out how we can improve services." What a lovely sentence, and this sentence is just as lovely, if not even more so. How can I support these workers and grow their numbers? This is a real quote. We are shaking our heads in acknowledgement of the sense of solidarity, at least that I'm feeling in response to some of the ideas incorporated in this quote. And I would love to beg your patience if we would be able to turn to one another in our small circular tables and have a chat, have a good 5-minute chat about what relevance this quote has for us here today around the symposium title of Bridging the Research and Practice Gap in the Human Services and Social Work in particular. So maybe 5 minutes, and then maybe we'll go around, not all of us, just in the interest of time, just a few ideas, and then with your patience, I'd like to share some ideas of mine about how we can take this quote as an orienting tool or a device to start to make some headway into this very thick concept of organizational and administrative issues that may be relevant to us in thinking about bridging the research and practice gap. So maybe about 5 minutes with your blessing.
How do I encourage
So there's two questions.
So folks, maybe take another minute to 2 minutes to start to condense some of this very rich conversation we're just beginning to have. What we'll do is we've got a hot mic right here, and we're going to go around from table to table to table. Obviously, it's impossible to summarize everything you're starting to kind of unpack in conversation, but if you could just add one thing in terms of grist for the mill for us to be thinking about in terms of this quote that's relevant to bridging the research and practice gap, that would be great. Just say one thing, no more than a sentence, and then pass the mic on over to the next table closest to you.
concepts or issues that we're facing when we want to do, one type of intervention that they don't understand that. They don't get the client-centered piece. And so we're kind of meeting a wall with that, what we've discussed.
Wonderful. Let's pass the mic in once again, about a sentence. That's wonderful, thank you.
Okay, a quick sentence. We're all from the same agency, and a quick sentence that we came up with is, maybe we just start with what we already doing. We already have a ton of data, we already have a ton of knowledge, maybe we just start where we are.
Basically, we've been talking about here in Salem, this collaboration, what can I'll just speak for myself, me as a practitioner, what can I do, what can I take away from here that will help me in the field of practice when I'm in here. So that will contribute to
Hi there. We were talking about incentives, and in order to how can the agency support workers, actually actively incentivizing those ideas and supporting those, rather than things like going to the expectations, which don't allow time for actually those people that are inspired and excited to actually get out there and pursue what they want to.
These are long, run-on sentences. It's okay. It's okay.
Hi. We were talking about an acknowledgement of a strengths-based perspective and how the person speaking is acknowledging what the agency is doing right and expanding on that instead of operating from a deficit perspective, as a lot of people are required to do.
We just said a few words around kind of opportunities to participate. So that people could have opportunities to dialogue and engage and activate and get their voices heard in the midst might grow enthusiasm for an expansion of those numbers.
We talked about the fact that it's really exciting when staff come to you and say they want to do more, but I think a lot of staff do. And we sometimes forget that when we're sort of caught up in the work. So we were just very excited about the positive fact and reminding us that there are staff who want to do more. And sometimes it has to do with how we frame things and how we talk about things in language. So collecting data is not as friendly as finding out how our clients are doing, or reframing it in a way that fits the practice world.
As you said, no on expectations. So we think setting the expectation for this type of forward thinking, and then creating the time and the space and the opportunity to cultivate this type of investigation.
Well, we talked about probably three different things, but as a program director, when people have good ideas and have good evidence to support it, usually we try to ink
try things out before we launch the bid. But I think the biggest obstacle that we find is we're in an organization that's an older organization, and as you said, administration, and it has a structure, and that's how the structure's always been. So it's very difficult to get information moving around the way it needs to move around, but it's also difficult to get new ideas in and operationalize.
Good, good.
We have 3 points that I was actually summarizing to 2. First of all, how do we balance the policy constraints with strategies to retain creativity so people will not leave if they cannot continue to be creative and do research and bring research to practice? And second, what are we doing in terms of availability of training once an evidence-based practice is considered good for the agency? Are there trainers available to train in that category?
Thank you.
We decided that we would be working on building an infrastructure that encourages organizational innovation and creativity.
Ooh, say that all again.
Allocation of financial and time resources toward that.
So a culture of innovation and creativity.
Somewhat similarly, saw this in terms of staff selection, knowledge of aptitude. This is a person, or these kinds of persons should be engaged in, depending on the agency model and infrastructure, in being a conduit for translating data and the importance and usefulness of it with the clinicians through training, coaching, data systems, all that good implementations, team stuff.
We have ABC. A is administrator and researchers should be on the same page. B is being valued. Our workers have to have the kinds of commitment as well as being valued by the agency and by the administrator. And C is the culture of it. And we do need to have educational opportunities, sharing opportunities, as well as holiday incentive and financial incentives. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of things we talked about were identifying the issues more clearly and using the evidence base to formulate a lesson plan and treatment plan with clients, and they have a measurable outcome at the end.
Persistence. I'll elaborate a little bit. We have a very diverse group. We have represented on the table academia, China, a social service agency, and a large community center. And we all agree that persistence through the use of articulation in electronic data, such as graphs, would get the attention of whatever level of bureaucracy you're presenting to. Persistence.
When you're doing agency work, who has time to read and think? And who has time to meet about reading and thinking? Thank you.
I'm sorry, what are we doing right now? Anyone else? Okay, good. So let me, once again, I'm so thankful for your patience, and I know this is a little bit off the map in terms of my formal remarks, but I have to confess. This paper Mike and I wrote maybe 6 months ago, and we've had some time to think about it. And I've also had some time to think about the sorts of remarks I would like to share. And I've also had some time to think about my thinking about this very complex set of issues that all fits under the rubric of organizational and administrative issues. And I have to confess that I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted for a number of reasons that have to do with the nature of this research to practice gap. The conversations that I generally have are with other researchers. The conversations that I don't have are with other people. Is that relevant here? The language I use is, you'll see embedded in both the paper if you choose to bore yourself to sleep by reading some of it. And some of the language in this PowerPoint reflect kind of my academic predispositions and understandings of this very complex set of practice-related issues. So to some extent, I'm seeking to do cross-cultural work here. And there's also a very important word that I would like to share with us called homophily. H-O-M-O-P-H-I-L-Y. That word can be summed up in the phrase, birds of a feather flock together. So to some extent, one of the things that I'm really valuing and appreciating about our time together is it really is an opportunity to do an intergroup dialogue exercise that brings multiple people with multiple dimensions of understanding and knowledge, and indeed in reflection upon issues that have to do with the intersection between practice and research, all under one roof, so to speak, and co-locate the conversation in a way that forces us to some extent to talk to each other in ways that we generally don't. Which once again is perhaps one of the reasons why I begged your patience and we spent about 5 or 10 minutes on this very simple exercise. And this is some of the grist for the mill, just so that we have conceptually some sense of where we're at, and then we'll be able to start to compare what we've got with the quote-unquote academic literature on what sorts of drivers at the organizational, institutional, and frontline levels, all embedded under the rubric of organizational and administrative issues, seem to be most salient in contributing to this gap, this culture gap, this structural gap, this policy analytic gap, this frontline practice gap between the research that we want to do, the research that we know is out there, and daily practice, the daily work that we uncover and we investigate and we experience in the human services. So some of the grist for the mill includes incentives. There aren't incentives. We don't often acknowledge our strengths and the agency's existing efforts. There aren't sufficient opportunities to participate. That was very pithily summed up by saying, who has the time to read and think? I certainly don't. I get paid for a living by talking. I don't have time to read and think.